Okay. Got that. Get the YouTubes going. Geek and Sundry. Oh. Videos. Live videos. All right, we should be live. So let me get the social going real quick so we can get that copied.
Reed, just so you know, you've got our sidebar on the YouTube video.
Fortunately, that's nothing important. Okay. Tweet and retweet.
Is it funny that I'm kind of more excited about the Dallas-Nashville games in the final?
No, since we don't have any... Since we don't have any information fantasy-wise about those teams, so I think that's perfectly fine for that. All right. Are you fellas ready? We've got the social going. Feel free to retweet those.
Yeah, I'm good.
Switching this to live chat. And all right. Let's see here. Do we have a funny brought to you by this week?
Ooh.
I forgot to set that one up. Maybe something with instant replay. Offside
Red
strap.
Bull, wait. Brought to you by Red Bull Arena, hosting everybody.
I like it. I like it. Official home of Canada.
Hosting everybody or Bubble 2.0?
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MLS Fantasy Insider, our episode 26, part 5 of the MLS is Back tournament fantasy takeaway series that we've been doing. It's been going on forever. It's almost over. We're so happy you're with us. This episode is brought to you by Red Bull Arena, home of every Canadian team for the MLS regular season. No. This episode is brought to you by MLSFantasyBoss.com and the amazing supporters of r/fantasy MLS. And no, I did it again. Crap, I did this last week too. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm out of it. This is also brought to you by our great Patreon supporters for MLS Fantasy Insider. You guys are awesome, and we're excited to have a special announcement for you in just a second. I'm your host, Reed Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com, though maybe not much longer if I can't get this intro right, guys.
Look, MLS is back. Us, we're still in preseason form.
That's right. We got more cobwebs during our COVID mental health stuff. I'm joined by my usual partners in fantasy, Mr. Michael Denton and Blaine Riffle. How you fellas doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, great. No, we'll polish this up for the intro. I mean, we've been kind of just winging it sometimes with these intros with random things going on, but we're getting close. We're getting so close. We have announcements of the regular season coming back. We have announcements of crazy shenanigans going on with Canadian teams. We have all sorts of ridiculous things going back. But before we get to all of that, we've got to talk about the MLS is Back tournament. We are at the final game, and Mike, I believe it ended up being as you and I predicted, but it's such a roller coaster. Before we get into some of our fantasy takeaways, just are you guys happy with the final of Portland versus Orlando?
Yeah, I mean, I really would have been happy regardless of the final. I think Minnesota played well. I think Philadelphia had an exciting tournament, and they're a young team. So, I mean, if it had been the complete opposite, I would have been happy. I don't think there was one of those. This semifinal was not one who's like, I really want to see that team in the final and nothing else. I thought all four semifinalists deserved to be there and would have been fine either way. But I think Portland has had a really good tournament. I think Orlando has been the star of the tournament. It's their home stadium or home city. And just kind of seeing what Oscar Pareja is doing and kind of finally unleashing Orlando has been really interesting to watch, and what that can do for the East is interesting. And then Portland, we all wanted to know what was going to happen with Valeri taking a bench role and Abobasi finally taking that striker role. So that's exciting from a U.S. level. So I think it's going to be a good final. There is a lot of poetry in the fact that the Portland Timbers, whose supporters group made a real big noise before this tournament about not wanting this tournament to happen, for them to make the finals against Orlando. There's some MLS ism and karma in that final, and it's just too delicious. Especially if Portland fans celebrate winning a tournament that they didn't want to happen in the first place. That's just
I mean, this is a complete because MLS tournament. I mean, if nothing else, this tournament embodies because MLS. Blaine, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm disappointed in the final. I didn't want to see Portland here at all. But the other, I mean, if you can put Philly in there, it's just the other three teams in the quarterfinals haven't won a major MLS trophy. And I know this is debatable whether this is major or not, but everybody's building it up as a big thing. It's a trophy. They're going to count it for a double or a treble this year if that's how far it goes. I mean, we know that's going to happen. This is a big deal. It's probably going to replace the U.S. Open Cup this year. I don't see how that's going to happen. And so I wanted to see a new team lift a trophy, and I'm still hoping for that. But
you can with Orlando.
I know, and I said I'm still hoping for that, but it's just I would have rather going into the final knowing a new team is going to lift a trophy this year that we haven't seen lift one before, and Philly being founded by the supporters and the supporter culture over there. I really wanted to see them in the final.
Fair.
And Mike's got a great point. Like, should Portland fans really celebrate a finals victory of a tournament they said was a bad idea, was morally wrong to try to do, dangerous for the players? I mean, I've seen very little from Portland fans. Now, I don't go out of my way to find their takes, but I've seen very little of, well, MLS actually did this bubble really well despite everything we said ahead of time. Like, I'm not seeing a lot of shocked takes of how well MLS has done coming out of Portland. So they're going to celebrate a trophy if they get it, even though they have no business celebrating the trophy with the way most of them acted ahead of the tournament. And so I just wanted to see Philly get in there.
Well, we have a Portland versus Orlando final, and I'm personally am rooting for Orlando because I think I made this as a response comment on Twitter, because I gave my public support on Twitter for Orlando, and the reason is simple. To all my Portland fans, I'm sorry, but I am a vindictive fan. I have always been a vindictive fan, and whenever someone comes at me and says, don't you want the team who wins the tournament to be the team that beat your team so you can say we were beaten by the best? No, I don't. I want revenge, and I want them to lose, and I want them to lose badly. So I am all for Portland. I'm all for Portland losing to Orlando and getting some sweet, sweet revenge for my FC Cincinnati team. So that is where I'm at and why I am cheering for Orlando right now. So hats off and good luck to our good friend Derek for that win. Maybe it will bring some happiness.
I've got the Mickey Mouse shirt on in support of my Orlando fans, mostly because giving them that tournament and watching Orlando and Atlanta fans argue about which is the more important tournament, the MLS's back tournament or the Campeones Cup that Atlanta won, is just going to be exciting. I just want to see the stupid arguments for the stupid trophies on both sides.
That will be good.
That's what I want to see.
That would be really good. I think I'm probably in the minority here with this opinion, but I really enjoyed this tournament overall, and I would actually love to see something like this in the future, even if this is just the way the season kicked off, where you had some sort of group stage that counted as your regular games and then a little pause to have a few more weeks. I mean, maybe it goes a little bit further so we don't have like a round of 16, but I don't know. But I would love to see a little tournament like this every year because I just thought it was fun. And it's like maybe this replaces preseason or the preseason start. I don't know. Whatever they want to do, but I really enjoyed this.
You know what they should do? They should use this to replace the games during the World Cup or Gold Cup or whatever. We have like, this like, oh, we're trying to do regular season games and this, like, make it come to Orlando. That way you can have like families and stuff, when it's not COVID time, you can have a fun tournament. You maybe count a few for the regular season games. And then you have something like a tournament that like with, stakes or whatever for a trophy. And we can add another major trophy. England has a League Cup for reasons that no one really can explain anymore. We can just make MLS's back as like a MLS trophy and have like a fun trophy in the middle of the season. We can showcase younger players. You can have meaningful games, have more development, and it'll be a lot of fun. Why not?
Yeah, I'd love it. But we digress. So we're going to talk about the final 2 games before this cup. We're not going to do fantasy takeaways. Well, maybe we'll sneak it in next episode, but we're not really planning on that because we can't do a whole episode about one game. So we're going to talk about the final 4 of the MLS's back tournament. First match being Philadelphia versus Portland. This one, as many of you likely know, ended in a 1-2 final in favor of Portland. Goals came from Jeremy Ebobisse, assisted by Valeri, and a goal from Blanco, assisted by Zuparik and Valeri. And then the lone goal from Philadelphia came from Andrew Wooten. The big controversy from this game, and I'll let you guys come down on this, has to be that offsides call with, I believe it was Shabilko, who would have tied it 2-2 right there at the end, called offsides by I want to say inches, but I don't even know if that's right. That even seems too much to say inches.
Soccer Photogrammetry or whatever on Twitter, who does all the mock-ups, I think his joke was toenails. His model showed less than an inch. His model did show in the freeze frame that he could get, it was offside by less than an inch. And my take on offside less than an inch is, how can an AR in real time make that call? How do you raise the flag in real time in the era of VAR? You leave the flag down at less than an inch. And I know I got a lot of response back from that. Well, half an inch, then it becomes an inch, then it becomes a foot, and you're starting to rely on VAR. But the rules clearly state tie goes to the attacker. In real time, with human judgment and a blink, less than an inch is a tie. How do you can't see that on the far side of the field?
Though I guess you could say in real time, human judgment called this one offsides because he raised his flag.
Yeah, but it was way too close.
But he was wrong, is what Blaine says.
That's my I just
no, and I agree with you overall with that. I've always been lukewarm on VAR because there is a human element to refereeing in the game that I appreciate, and this captures that. I mean, this is the thing where the ref would have called it off, and it technically perhaps should have actually have been given towards the attacker with the benefit of the doubt. And this is the kind of thing that I'm like, well, okay. I mean, we're just going to rely on it so much. It takes a little bit out. It takes a little bit away from me. Took a lot away from Philadelphia, so I feel bad about that, even though technically, which is the best kind of correct, he was offsides. Toenails.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for VAR to do anything, and we've kind of seen over this tournament that VAR hasn't been used as much. I think that because there's less cameras and the angles are kind of off. Mm-hmm. Even on this one, it was kind of an odd angle, I think, for a quick VAR. And I mean, as Blaine said, when you do the lines, like, you might have been off by like something, so it's hard to say there's clear and obvious video evidence that the call should be overturned. But I mean, I generally agree with Blaine. If it's close like that, you need to leave the flag down and give the tie to the attacker.
But of course, there were some other big elements from this game. Fantasy takeaway is that Portland got its goals off of set plays, so some excellent service still coming in from Valeri, as we expect. That's one of the reasons why he becomes such a premium and highest scoring fantasy player of all time in the modern era. So goals came off those set plays, very very important to look at who are those set piece takers. But also botched PK from Santos, I believe, had the botched PK skied it over the goal from Philadelphia. So Philly had its chance as well during this game, but it was good. This was a good game. We had 17 shots for Philly, 15 for Portland, 18 crosses for Philly, 9 for Portland, and then possession was 61-39 in favor of Philadelphia. The same fantasy players that you should be taking away from this are the same players we've been talking about the whole time. I mean, Shavilko is doing great on offense, getting a lot of chances. Monteiro is doing great with providing service. Santos has had great moments. And then back on defense, you're looking at Elliott and Wagner are doing well with generating bonus points. That could be helpful. Portland, again, Blanco is just tearing it up. Valeri is tearing it up. Valeri started this game, but was pulled out in the 70-something minute. I think he played 70 or 80 during this game.
He went almost 90.
Did he go? Okay, so it was in the 80th. I knew he got pulled out near the end. And then 1 or 2 games before this, he was actually subbed on to the field. So may keep an eye on Valeri some as the season starts. That could very well, though, have been influenced by Orlando weather and just the stakes at certain points of this tournament. Villafana has been one that we've talked about several times this tournament, doing very well with defensive stats. And then Zuparic on defense had some massive numbers as well. So a lot of the same players. This really just went to emphasize and confirm what we've been talking about for the whole time, some of the carryover from last week. But it makes me real excited about Philly. Continue to have faith in Portland choices. And did you guys watch this game?
Yes, I did. Philly looks really good, but I think this game actually was a huge detractor for Philly in the fantasy realm.
Really?
Yes, they have no depth.
Okay, no, fair.
They made two subs in this game, and neither one. Wooten got his first goal in MLS. Like, that's great, but other than that, Wooten hasn't done a whole lot coming in. Ilsinho has been kind of the magic man for him.
Yeah.
So tune in, but this is a game you're trailing 2 goals in the 70th minute. You have to throw everything at it. They bring on Wooten right after that. He does get a goal in the 85th. I mean, again, they could have tied it. It was the narrow offside goal. It worked, but we're in this tournament format and they're getting some breaks. What happens when we go back to the regular season? If they have no depth and no good rotation, and we're playing in a 5-sub system, you're either going to see guys that are really, really good for fantasy options going 70, 80, 90 minutes regularly, or you are going to see a team that after about 2-3 weeks is so run into the ground, you can't even rely on the main attackers. So it's one of those we're going to have to watch in the regular season. The lack of rotation really scares me. These guys are probably going to be hot for the first few weeks, but I would expect them to kind of cool off as tired legs get there, unless they figure out some rotation pattern that's going to save the legs on these guys.
What do you think about that, Mike?
I'm not as worried about Philly. Even after they went down 2-0, that's really when their chances started to come. If you look at the expected goals, they actually had a higher. I think it's 2.36 to 1.24. According to American Soccer Analysis. So, but most of that the only real big chance that they got before was, I think, the PK that they skied. So they were able to generate chances afterwards. It was just, a little too late, and maybe if the offside call had gone their way, we'd be talking a little differently. I'm not as worried about the depth as Blaine is. I think depth is going to be an issue. And we'll talk about what we've seen from the schedule so far. I think everyone is going to struggle. Even during this tournament, I don't think a lot of teams were able to, really take full advantage of all 5 attackers. The Premier League voted down the 5 sub rule pretty much because the smaller teams didn't want to just get absolutely bulldozed by the larger teams who have that capability, because most teams don't. in the English Premier League, and that's absolutely true in a salary cap in MLS. So it is. I mean, every team is going to struggle with depth going forward, but I'm not too worried about Philly. To me, for them to be able to generate those kind of opportunities against Portland when teams such as LAFC struggled to create those same opportunities, even though they were down, is a positive. So I'm looking forward to Philly. I'm more interested in them. But I mean, the takeaway still has to be Portland. Blanco and Ebobisse, they're cheap options. And under this new double game week format that we have, Valeri subbing on and off, if he's productive, you can take that gamble much more comfortably than you could in a normal scenario where you really need him to start. Because as long as he gets one game and one goal in one of those games, you're going to make your money back. So I think there's a lot to like from a fantasy perspective out of Portland.
Yeah, if you look at Ebobisse is a 5.9 million forward, and then going down the midfield, I mean, Blanco is an 8.9 million midfielder compared to Valeri, who is 11.2. Great take. You got to come back, Blaine?
Yeah, two things. Zuparik is the other one that I'm just all over right now. I think he's going to be a guy you can build around and run with. And I think we've got an answer this year for the Blanco versus Valeri debate, and I think it's Blanco hands down. I think he's been the more productive player.
It's been on the rise.
I would expect his price and Valeri's price to flip-flop fairly shortly after the season comes back. But with Valeri not starting, I think that's the easy call now. If you're picking a midfielder, you're taking Blanco every time.
Yeah, Zuparik is a 6.9 million defender, so not the cheapest guy, but if you're going to have one or two pricey guys, he's been great and has done fantastic with some good bonus points.
He's dominating headers, offensive, defensive, both ways. It's just been fantastic.
Yep.
And then I think since we only got two games, I've got one more topic because I heard it on the broadcast for this one, and this is kind of a good one to talk about. The rumor mill is circling that this was Brendan Aaronson's last game with Philly. They think because we're in August,
right,
Euro teams are going to come in and give Philly an offer they can't refuse, and Philly wants the money to reinvest. This no depth thing that I talk about has got Philly fans up in arms, and they're saying Aaronson is too good for this league. He is going to command too much money in a trade, and they want depth. They can go in and reinvest in this team. Do you guys think Aaronson's gone? And if he is, what does that do to your outlook on Philly?
Well, it depends on who they get. I think that's going to be maybe that's the cop-out way. But I mean, we want to be a selling league. Philadelphia has some pieces to work with. If they think they can get a good guy, then yeah, I think he will.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as plugged into the transfer rumor market because it generally just drives me nuts.
Truth.
But it's such a weird transfer market. I don't really know what's going to happen, but I will say I doubt from what I've seen in Philadelphia historically that they can make a sale and then immediately turn it into depth. Mm-hmm. They may be able to turn it into depth in the next window, but I would definitely downgrade Philadelphia significantly if that trade happens, because my general belief would be that they would not be able to replace it for the rest of the season, which may be a smart move overall. If you say, look, this is going to be a half season, we're not getting fans in the seats, we're kind of a club that's struggling, we really want to maximize that when we can get fans in. We're kind of okay with taking the loss on this season if we can think we're going to be better whenever we can get fans back in the seat. That might make sense for you as a club. I'm not, that might be the right decision to make overall, but as far as for the rest of this season, I would be skeptical that we would be seeing the same heights out of Philadelphia.
Get your money, talk about your success in that tournament, and then build for 2021.
Unless they bring in Patrick Mullins, then they're winning.
Well, there you go. I will make one more comment about what you said, Blaine, with depth. I think that's a very valid fantasy takeaway to bring from here. I'm like Mike. I'm not as worried about Philadelphia. A common question that we definitely get when call-ups happen or when a tournament comes up or when the players are injured is who's next, who's the backup, who's going to take the place, and will they get points? It happens to every team, and I think your general takeaway from Philadelphia is when the A players are there, I want the A players. And if the A players aren't there, well, I'm probably not going to look for who's the backup. I'm going to go to the next team with A players to go for. And that's what fantasy turns into a lot, is we just look for the next A player to take, unless the backup player has great potential and can be a great differential. Philly may not have those differentials. So I think that's a very valid takeaway. And that's what I feel too. If Montiero's injured, I'm like, I don't know. I'm probably not going to go down to his replacement. I'm going to be looking for somebody else who's a playmaker. All right, Orlando versus Minnesota. This was a good game. I guess it depends on who you. I don't know. I thought this was a fine game. Started kind of slow. Orlando wasn't able to get much, and then Nani was like, "Well, okay, I'm going to get a brace." There we go. It happened. And then after that, Orlando set back a little bit, withstood some pressure from Minnesota, and they just couldn't get it done. So I think that's a huge takeaway, a huge bonus for Orlando being able to withstand some pressure, though Minnesota's not the most offensive powered team. Goals came from Nani, assisted by Jansen, again from Nani, assisted by Mendez in the first half. Then we had Benji Mitchell getting one in the second half for Minnesota, assisted by Urso and Nani. For Orlando was the third one, assisted by Urso and Nani. And then Mason Toy got the lone goal for Minnesota, assisted by Kevin Molino, who's a name that we've talked about several times during this tournament here. And I think that's a highlight I want to put right now. Kevin Molino came in to replace Ethan Finlay during this game, and we talked some about Ethan Finlay at the beginning, about how he had some spark, maybe he was kind of getting back into his groove, and I think not. That's been the problem often with Ethan Finlay when he was at Columbus and now here at Minnesota, is he's kind of had brief sparks, but then it's not been consistent. I think Kevin Molino is the one that we need to be keeping an eye on, that he's done well in this tournament, and he's someone who I would hope to continue to do well fantasy-wise going forward for Minnesota, especially once they get Opara back to help solidify that defense more as well, giving him freedom to really go offensive. Shots, Minnesota outshot Orlando 7-17, outcrossed Orlando 8-38, and possession was basically 50-50. So there's that sort of sitting back and absorbing in the second half. On Orlando's side, Nani is the clear standout here from this tournament. Nani is the guy from Orlando that you want. First name on your list, no problem. And then also Moutinho did really well on defense. Had some absolutely great numbers right there if you want to look at an Orlando defender. On Minnesota, of course, Kevin Molino did very well, but also Gregus. Again, Gregus has been a name that we've spoken of several times. He had some great, some cross numbers, some key passes, but so someone who could potentially get bonus points right there as well. But Molino is the name for me that comes out of this. Mike, Blaine, did you guys watch this one?
Yeah. I watched this one. I was surprised by how thoroughly Orlando dominated this game. I was expecting a little bit more of a back and forth, maybe, kind of some runs and periods. But from what I could tell, Minnesota never really got in this game, even with the goal at the end. You're absolutely right. This was the Nani show. Mm-hmm. I've seen Orlando a few times in this tournament, and this, and Nani's had like great moments, but he just absolutely dominated this game. Definitely something to watch. 10.5 as a midfielder. As far as the expected goals, even with Minnesota getting so many shots, they still lost the expected goals battle, 1.88 to 1.06. Which is really crazy considering Minnesota spent an entire half down to nothing trying to generate shots. And I think that's a credit to Oscar Pareja's defense.
Yeah.
I think Orlando is going to be a much tougher out. I think they're kind of a team where we maybe want to consider clean sheet hunting with them. If what we see is going to translate over into the regular season, but it's definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, and their defenders are all a little bit pricey. Again, they're usually around that 7.0 range. I know Jansen's another one that Orlando particularly has been big on. Didn't have as much as far as potential bonus point generation when I was looking at the stats for this game, but he has been a name we mentioned some before. But both of those guys are 7.0, so a little bit pricey. If you're clean sheet hunting, probably going to be a situation just like with Philly that we mentioned. Or Portland that we mentioned before, that you may grab one guy to kind of build your defense around, or a couple of big name players, and try to find some value there.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw a little different. I saw Minnesota kind of come into this one late, try to get it. They did get the goal when Toy came on. They did start putting a lot more pressure on Orlando late, and Orlando's defense really stepped up to the task and did it. Benji Michel got the runner goal. It was one of those garbage time, get it off of a clearance on a overloaded set piece, and really just exploited the opening in the back. So the game was a little closer than the scoreline says. But man, Orlando's defense with Galese in the back in goal is just fantastic. This has been a good defense, and they got a really, really good goalkeeper to back this up. And Gregush is such a monster on set pieces and can put the ball where he wants to. And Galese was reading most of those. It was a good performance all the way around, and I'm impressed by the way Orlando's defense cleared it out. And it's a defense I'm going to be watching closely going back into the regular season of fantasy.
All right. Any other general takeaways? I mean, I think both of these teams are going to have options going forward. Minnesota probably a bit more on the defensive side, though. If Mason Toy does do well, he is a value at fantasy right now at 7.0. So if he gets some form behind him into the regular season, could be a great option right there. Though they do have Amaria, who is priced higher.
I would throw out. I would say Gregush is probably your number one pick off of Minnesota week in and week out. If you're looking at a name, that's going to be the first name you look at, especially if you can't check rosters.
Depending on how Molino does, though.
Yeah, if you can't check rosters.
Sure.
Like,
Okay.
Gregush, his set piece, his corners, his free kicks, everything is so good, so dangerous. He's such a playmaker for this team, playing a little deeper. His bonus point potential is just going to be fantastic. Goals and assists last year came pretty regularly. He's not going to blow up your score sheet on that all the time, but he gets the bonus points to make up for it. If he can bag a goal and an assist every 3 games, plus his bonus points, he's going to be hitting like one of those bigger other premium guys that may get a goal 2 out of the 3 games. His bonus points are going to make up for the extra production, or for the little bit lacking production week in and week out. So he's the name. I think Molino is going to be your heavy hitter here. Mm-hmm. If he's starting, and I'm not detracting from that, but he's taking a bench role. You're going to have to watch those lineups. You're going to have to play with this. Gregush is your set and forget guy on this team. And I think you're going to want coverage pretty much every week from Minnesota with the way they're playing right now. And so just keep that in mind. Those are the 2 names, but Gregush is going to be the guy that when I'm busy is going to be in my lineup more often than not.
Yeah, and he is 9.3 with fantasy, so pretty good steal. Didn't do much in the first game, but came back with 17 points in the second game with a goal and 2 assists, so and a handful of bonus points. But yeah, if he gets those bonus point numbers, he had, I think, a lot of those crosses in this last game.
He had 11 crosses in this last game, and that doesn't include his set piece shots.
Yep. All right, so those are 2 games. It sets up the final of Orlando versus Portland. Should be interesting to say the least. Go Orlando. Big takeaways, guys. Second part of our 3-part show tonight. What are your final big takeaways from the MLS is Back tournament? I have broken my takeaways down into the final 4 teams, some general takeaways from the bracket that I liked, other just takeaways from the tournament, and then flops and just no. Those are the sections I had. So with my final 4 teams, I am saying I think Orlando has some serious options going forward in fantasy, much more than I know I gave them at the beginning of the season. I don't know if they'd be a 3-player team because I think so much is on Nani, but I have more faith in some of their defensive options, so this could be an easy 2-player team for me going forward. Minnesota also has good defensive options, and the re-emergence of Kevin Molino is something that I am very happy to see. And Blaine already spoke very well about Gregush right there. Philadelphia, we spoke about earlier. I think they look great for fantasy. Good points about rotations, but I think those core guys they have right there, some of the defensive options. Philly could be a 3-player team easily, I think, under the right situations. And then Portland, you got to be shifting your focus fantasy-wise on the Blanco. Can't blame you for still going to Valeri, but Blanco is just getting so much more involved with everything that with the lower price, I think he has to be your first person to go with. Those are from my final 4, which we already touched. General about the teams that made it into the final bracket. What do you guys think? Or any general fantasy takeaways you want to take? Yeah, anything.
I got one just random stat that was thrown out in the last game. Jeremy Ebobisse has played in every single competitive game for Portland since 2018.
Really?
Since he got thrown into the start, or really started to come on and play. So Savarese likes him.
Huh.
And some of those have been sub roles. I mean, admittedly, he's not starting every game, but I was shocked when I heard that, because he's not been on our fantasy radar the whole time. He's not a guy we've been really high on consistently for the last 2 years, but he has played in every single competitive game for Savarese. If he's not starting and you forget to pull him out of your lineup, you're probably going to get some points there. That may be bad for you, because he may get the 1.10-minute cameo, but it's just something to keep an eye on. He is. I was shocked when I heard it. General takeaways for the knockout, or for the knockout round teams. Don't sleep on Vancouver as a slouch team. They made it here. They played sporting strong. The new goalkeeper is going to get a starting shout here. This is going to be fantastic, and they're going to get a lot of reinforcements. They did this without 3 or 4 of their regular starters, and they gave sporting fits. They made it to the knockout stage. Just don't think of Vancouver as the punching bag they have been. I have a hunch on this one that they're going to come out with Cavallini, and when they get Montero back and some of these other names back in the group, they're going to come out a whole lot stronger than we expect to begin with, and don't fall for that trap. And then, Reed, I can't believe you didn't say it, but
I got more. I'm giving you guys a chance to talk.
Yeah, Cincinnati's the other one. This is going to be a wild year. Cincinnati is no longer the punching bag they were. They're going to bend but don't break defense. And what I see now is no really, really bad teams other than Atlanta and Chicago.
You and I have some disagreement here, but
I don't see as many bad teams. I don't see as many gimme games, and especially if we're going to do this 5 subs thing the whole year. I don't see as many gimme games where you're going to be. You may have some top heavy teams that really you can pick them against anybody who's kind of questionable, but I don't think you're going to see the heavy mismatches every week, and your punching bag teams aren't really punching bags anymore.
I'll throw out a couple more and then let Mike have your shot. I still think, even though they went off in the first round of the bracket, I still think Columbus is legit. They had a little bit of trouble when they hit their first real defensive team before Cincinnati maybe got its game together. But Columbus is legit and easily has 3-player options that you can take from the fantasy season. I loved what I saw from San Jose. One of the biggest surprises for me during this tournament. The midfield has some great options right there. That's probably where I'd focus most of it. Maybe a 2-player team at times, but I think it's really going to come down mostly between Eriksson and Vako for your primary fantasy targets. And LAFC, so much of them looks like a team that was going to suffer from the same problem as Houston, just with all those options and where's it going to come from. But it's not going to be a problem because they're going to get Vela back and they're going to be fine. So they're going to be fun to watch, and I think you're going to be able to have a couple. If you want to load up on 2 attacking players, I think LAFC is going to be your first go-to team right there. Mike, give you a chance before I rattle off some more.
All right. I think I don't know that I agree that there's not as many bad teams. I think LA Galaxy and Houston Dynamo are absolute punching bags. I'm picking against them every week. Their defenses are horrific. I watched them play in an important game for New York City, and they were hilariously bad. So I'm not picking anyone from those teams. I'm picking against them. So I'm going to disagree a bit with Blaine. What my takeaway is that I don't know that there's a great team in MLS this year with an asterisk of maybe LAFC when they get Vela back. which we'll have to see what happens with them. But as far as like 3-player teams, I think there's only 3 teams that I'm thinking that's going to be.
Okay.
Portland, LAFC, and Columbus. I think those are the only teams that are really solid top to bottom. Atlanta, we talked about their problems ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
New York City doesn't look the same under its new coach. I don't trust them as much. I think Maxi Morales is probably your only consistent guy. I'm not going to go all in. And this is as with the schedule, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. This is absolutely true. A team really needs to blow you away with what we're looking at, with so many options and so many games and the new double game week rule. It's just really going to be hard to justify going all in on a team. And with the teams that we've seen in this tournament just not looking as great or as spectacular, I think those are the only ones to go through. Columbus and LAFC for their greatness, and Portland for being good and being really good while being really cheap. With Mobasi and Blanco, as we talked about before. So I think that gives you a little bit more flexibility with Portland, whereas a lot of the, LAFC especially, they're just so much more expensive. Even when we talked about Orlando, a lot of those guys in the back line that you would be looking for, they're just very pricey.
Yeah.
So that's where I think that's my biggest takeaway, is that there isn't as much. I think we've talked about a lot of the other ones, downgrades to Atlanta and some of those other teams that just don't look as strong and probably aren't going to get as much of an opportunity in the transfer window, with the weirdness of this window, to improve.
So I try to get at least one takeaway from every team, so I'm not leaving anybody out. So just to rattle off some more other general takes that I took. New York City FC has struggled, and they may really be too expensive for the kind of performance you're going to get for them. So I don't really know how heavy I'd lean on New York City FC right now. Toronto has some good value options, especially to accompany some of their premium players, with Piatti and Pozuelo right there. So some good options there. Again, I agree with you, Mike. I don't know if it's a 3-player team, but could definitely have some good go-to guys there. Sporting Kansas City, I think, has potential to be a 3-player team. They did really well in this tournament at times, though they seem to kind of struggle at the 3rd position often. It would be like, okay, you had some great midfield performances here and a great forward performance, and the defense didn't do so great, or the other way around. Sometimes it just go ahead, Blaine. You disagree?
They are a 3-player team, 3-player team for you, but it's Polito, Kinda, and a defender, whoever you take on the defensive side. And that's or Melia. Like it's never going to be a 3 attacking team. It's going to be those 2 guys that are making all the plays, doing all the damage, and a defender, or it's going to be double up on defense when you've got it, because they look good with Punchets and Smith back there. Beasler right now is the odd man out with the way this defense is playing. That's your big takeaway for me. To watch that, Beasler is not one of your premier guys right now. And so this could be a 2 from defense and 1 attacker, with you've got a couple of big names that you kind of can rely on to get things. So I think they are a 3-man team.
But the reason I say sometimes is because Polito didn't really get the goals that you want to see to be like that automatic go-to guy. I mean, Wano got 3, Tyler got 3, Santos got 3, Nani got 3 during the regular part of the tournament. Yeah. So not quite as consistent.
He's been getting the assist, and he's doing the setup. He's going to get the passing bonus points, which aren't coming through in the stat sheet right now.
Right, that's true. But I want to see more goals.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. No,
we want goals. He's got a bonus point potential that's not showing up.
That's good. No, you make good points. Passing forwards are good fantasy forwards. New England, we talked about this a week or 2 ago. They need Carles Heel, but I think they should be on your short list. He potentially is injured, so be careful about that. But I think New England should be on your short list.
Oh, he's out.
Oh, he's out? I didn't see that up.
Yeah, he had a surgery, so he is out.
I did see that up there. Yes. No. I still think they should be on your short list, but definitely not as attractive without him. I did see that. I forgot about that. Colorado, I think, has a couple of great options to consider, but they may mostly be a switcheroo kind of option for you, depending on how the rest of their season goes. Sure. Houston is still Houston. I think Mike put it very well right there. Unlike Blaine, I think Chicago has some promise. They didn't make it into the bracket stage, out of the group stage, but we got to see more from Chicago, and I respect Chicago more after this tournament than I did going into them. However, I want to see a few more games from Chicago before I really start going with some of their players. Maybe one player out the gate, probably a switcheroo. But I definitely have more fantasy respect for Chicago coming out of this tournament than I did going in. The New York Red Bulls could have done better. That's my takeaway from them. They were just weird. It was just really weird to kind of watch them play. Teams that I think were clear flops. My note here verbatim says, all in capital, Atlanta, W2F, Joseph, new coach, goof. So that's Atlanta. They're a hard pass for me without Joseph. It's just not. We'd have to see what happens with the new coach. But right now, it's just I don't want anything to do with that. My comment, sorry to all my Seattle friends about Seattle, is just Seattle, what are you doing? They just didn't really seem to wake up, kind of skirted through to get into the bracket, I felt like. So I'm just not high on Seattle right now. They've got the options that should be doing fantasy-wise. You know Ladero's going to do well. You know some of the Rui Diaz should be getting some points, but there's just a consistency problem there that I didn't really care for. I'd probably look for some other teams first. LA Galaxy are bad. Mike said that well, yep. I think as well. LA Galaxy are just bad. DC United couldn't get their pieces to work well together. They have some options that make them tempting at times, but they're just not coming together to produce. And if that continues into fantasy in the regular season, not so interested in that. I think Miami underperformed. We expected a lot more out of Miami in this tournament, and they just did not deliver. So definitely holding back on that. And then my teams that I'm still saying just say no. Vancouver is at the top of that list for me. I understand that they did not have some players here, but I'm still just saying no. That one great, crazy performance by their goalkeeper is cool from a soccer point of view, but from a fantasy point of view, they're going to have to do a whole lot more for me to make me want to pick one of those players over somebody like Valeri or Blanco or anybody else in the midfield section. I mean, if we're going to look at Nani or even people like Kay, or, I mean, there's so many other players I think are coming before Vancouver than that. I'm a hard no on Montreal right now. They're really good against Toronto, but other than that, you don't know what's going to happen with Montreal. I'm a no against RSL. I was sort of surprised they made it this far in the tournament, and there's no consistency there outside. And I've just gone blank for their one midfield player. Rusnak. There we go. Yes. It just completely left me. It just left me. And then I ended with Cincinnati.
That's what Rusnak does a lot of the time.
That's right. That's right. I think Cincinnati was better than people expected, Blaine. I think you said that well. I don't think they'll necessarily be a punching bag this year, but it's still a team that I'm just going to say no to as far as fantasy-wise. There's still rebuilding that needs to be done. And then, of course, Nashville and Dallas did not feature in this tournament. So no takeaways from them. That's sort of every team right there, just so we have a touch of fantasy for everyone. I think I got everybody. I don't think I left anybody out. There we go. Charlotte has a cool crest, but a lame name. And soon we'll hear more about FC St. Louis SC United Real FC St. Louis SC United.
My fantasy team name for a long time was Real New Orleans City FC.
Okay, and now the final topic of discussion for tonight.
Can I throw out one fantasy takeaway from Dallas?
Sure.
Which is a weird one because they didn't feature.
Their keeper's gone?
Their keeper is gone. I just wanted to mention that. Jesse Gonzalez's contract was terminated because of domestic violence issues. For fantasy, I've looked at the blogs that assume that they're going to bring another keeper in, but until they do, they don't have a keeper price above 4.5, so that's a terrific switcheroo option that we haven't seen them in action, but I think we know enough of FC Dallas and their history to know that they're at least a decent defensive option. So cheap keepers, if you need budget, that's going to be something to pay attention to. So, and we'll get to see them coming up, which probably leads into Reed's next point.
Yes, my next point.
I had one more to throw out with.
I had a segue there, Blade.
I'm sorry.
So
I
good.
just
So
leave it to the Sporting KCC to prevent the flow.
in the 80th minute, in the 89th minute, Blaine.
I love the way this tournament went down, and we got to see a ton of kids play. We got to see the young guys play. This has been huge for us, but the big, huge takeaway I see here is 3 forwards in autoroos and switcheroos is going to be massive for you coming out of this, and we have the money to do it. There are, of all the forwards that are priced 10 million and above, the only 2 I think we can rely on are Vela and Rossi. I threw Polito out of there. He's at 12 million. It's going to be tough to justify 12 million without the goals. I know I like his bonus points. I think he's going to be solid, but I can understand having trouble justifying 12 million without the goals. Andrasic is at a flat 10, and we didn't get to see anything from him in this tournament for Dallas. But the names that we saw really lighten up the score sheets in this tournament, like Akinola is fighting for Josie, who's at an 8.9 right now, but he's cheap. We've got all these cheap options that really showed up in this tournament that are going to be there. And we're going to have a lot of options, a lot of play. But this is a great time with the big budget that we started with to run a lot of Arus. And you got a guy, and I don't even know where he's at on the list, but Bradley Wright Phillips just tore it up. And I think I just haven't sorted by that. He's at 6 million. There he is. I scrolled through and found him. He's at 6 million right now. The cheap options are there. Mason Toy looked really good. If Rui Diaz isn't playing well, Will Bruin's there at 5.5. Got to throw him out there for Rita. I think, did Bruin have more goals this tournament than Rui Diaz? Did Rui Diaz even score?
Maybe.
I mean, the fact that we even
Will
have to
Bruin
ask that
scored.
question,
That's really
we know Will
Bruin
Bruin scored. We have to ask if Rui Diaz scored. Bo was another one. Like we're talking about some big names, some guys we counted on in the past. They just didn't show up. Look at the kids. Look at who's out there, and run your Arus on your forwards, because there's a lot of options and a lot of cheap options you can stash on your bench and potentially get some massive points out of, because they're playing well.
Bo is another forward, though, who can get some key passes and stuff, too, though. So, a bit more fancy viability. All right, a little bit rough of a transition, but the transition to our third segment of the show, which is probably why some of you are listening to the podcast right now, is because we are talking about the return of the MLS regular season and what that means for the official MLS fantasy game. And I've had a couple of questions, at least, about this already through Twitter. Thanks for you to those who have reached out just to ask. I'll tell everybody now the same thing I've told them is I don't know. That's the short of it. With the announcement of the return of the regular season on the 20th with the New York City Derby, we're hoping that means we're going to see fantasy come back. We've heard James talk about that on the show. What the hope is with the game in the future. Potential changes, but right now, don't know for sure. We've reached out to our contacts at MLS to see if we can find out some more details, but right now I don't have anything to report about that. However, that means we can do our second most enjoyable activity with the MLS fantasy season, and that is speculation about the MLS fantasy season. In particular, we're going to look at the schedule, because we're seeing some of the schedule and what that might mean for whatever, if we get fantasy back. I feel like we are. I mean, it looks like we are. We're hoping we are. We hope we are. We're going to pretend we are going forward. So,
otherwise, this podcast is going to get really.
I know we're just gonna I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to do crazy stuff after this. If you didn't think that we were doing crazy stuff already, I'm gonna bust out my old Star Wars CCG cards, and we'll just start doing some random stuff there, or play villainous like we always threaten to do. Yes. But we got the schedule, and so we're going to talk about some of the potential fantasy takeaways we can get from the schedule right now. Mike, I'm throwing to you because I know you've looked at this already.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing from the schedule is just insanity. Lots of double game weeks coming up. Lots of weird, like in the first week alone, there's games on Monday and Tuesday and Thursday. So I don't know. One of the biggest questions I think this is going to be facing James and Ben is how do you break up the weeks because there's a lot of condensed, especially in this first week, because it's almost like a Heineken rivalry week. I guess it's kind of what it is going to be. I don't know if they've officially announced that yet. It wasn't clear to me in the announcement. But that's the same kind of schedule where you have games every time, starting with the New York Derby, and going forward. I think there's a Cascadia Cup in there. There's El Trafico. A lot of big, juicy matchups are going to happen in that first week. But I mean, going forward, there's going to be tons of double game weeks. And so one of the other reasons I said I don't know if I see a whole lot of player teams, because when you have that many games and with the no double game week rule, it's really going to be tough to justify going all in on one team because there's so many good matchups that you're going to have to choose. So that's going to be important. The other part isn't necessarily something you find in the schedule, but it wasn't kind of made real clear in the announcement, but came out afterwards in regards to New York City's stadium situation. It was originally reported that New York City was going to host all of its games at its training camp, but they were not able to do that because MLS mandated that all games have to happen at night. And the reason for that is because MLS wants teams to basically fly in the day of, go to the game, play the game, get on a bus to the charter plane, out. So there's two main takeaways that's going to change the way MLS teams travel. One, it's all charters now. That was something we talked about back in March about how it was nice that MLS teams were getting an expansion of the charter system, but because of COVID, now everything is going to be chartered. But on the other hand, they're always flying in. So we're not expecting a whole lot of cross-country matches with the condensed schedule and all that. But still, if you're flying in, even on our charter bus, our charter plane, that's a tough ask. So I think there's going to be more emphasis on home teams going forward, just because not having to take a flight the same day is going to be such an advantage. We have seen teams have success. It's not, absolute, but I think generally speaking, you're going to want to pick the home teams. We've always said that, but I think it's going to be really important this season. And then just trying to manage this schedule is going to be very difficult. We talked about it, the depth to these players. You're going to see rotation. I think we're going to be really happy that we have the double game week rule, because trying to figure out which players we're going to play 2 games in this system is going to be an absolute nightmare. But yeah, so I think one other thing for people who aren't as familiar, MLS has not announced the entirety of the regular season. They just announced a section where basically teams in your region are going to play. So New York City is only going to be playing teams that are close to it, like Columbus, New York. One other big thing that I don't think has been officially announced yet, but the Canadian teams are basically going to have to borrow stadiums in the United States because the Canadian government will not allow teams to cross the border. So Toronto FC, like New York City, is going to be making its home at Red Bull Arena, hence the brought to you by at the top of the show. I haven't seen what Vancouver and Montreal are supposed to do. I don't know if y'all have seen what they're going to be doing yet, but I'm assuming they're going to be doing something similar. It wouldn't surprise me if Vancouver ended up at Portland. I would say Seattle, except Seattle is also sharing its stadium with an NFL team, so I don't know about the logistics there. But I expect Montreal will probably be doing something similar, maybe with Minnesota, maybe with Chicago. Although Chicago's playing in Soldier Field, or they were supposed to this year. I don't know where they actually are playing games. Maybe going back to Bridgeview might not be a bad idea for this season. But anyway, there's a lot of difficulties, but I think the main fantasy takeaways are pick home teams, and it's going to be really difficult to pick from one team alone with just so many games that you're going to have in every single week.
Yeah, and don't forget, with the double game week, the new system that we're assuming is going to stay in effect is you have 2 games, and you're only going to get the highest score from one game. So that potentially means if you miss one of the double games, you can still get points from a player. So it gives you a lot of options. You may be able to bring in a guy who hasn't played yet who can give you points still. So you can get a second shot at a guy. If you miss a deadline, you can still bring somebody in for a different game. So it's going to be interesting navigating all the double game weeks that could potentially be coming up. But Mike makes some great points. We don't know what the fantasy week's going to be. Is it going to be from Thursday to Thursday? Is it going to stop on Sunday and go with Monday? Are we potentially going to just have to drop a couple of games every now and then to give not necessarily the players time, but to give the system and the admins time to get everything updated and to double check points with Opta and make sure that the scores are correct? Maybe we'll even see some weeks that are longer than a week. I have no idea, but we're hoping that when we get in touch with someone at MLS, they'll come on the show and talk to us. It could just be wild. We're still expecting... Well, Blaine, I'll kick this down to you because you were mentioning before the show that James had been on and talked about some things. So what are a few of the comments James mentioned before that you're hoping we can get some clarification on?
I don't know that there's much we can get clarification on. I know that...
What is going on?
Yeah, I know he said the fantasy game is going to be back. He said that for after whatever the tournament ended up being. He said the fantasy game was coming back with the regular season. So I'm expecting an announcement soon on that, just taking James at his word from that. But I do know from conversations that the big reason why we didn't have fantasy for MLS is back is because of the Monday and Tuesday games.
Yeah.
They were around the clock, around the week. And we're going right back into this regular season with Monday and Tuesday games. It's a logistical nightmare for them to have to update player prices one evening and have the game turn around and you have to make your predictions in the time from the time it takes to get the player pricings updated until we go live, until roster lock. Typically we get end of game Sunday evening sometime, and they do all of their processing and score adjustments for stats and everything, and then price adjustments by 8 or 9 a.m. Eastern time on Monday. Well, if they do that, we're going to be playing it the next day, and I want to know what they're going to do, if there's going to be a grace period, if they could potentially open up the week a little early, pending price changes. But that doesn't really work because then you could have an invalidated roster because you're over budget because somebody went up 0.1 more than you expected them to. So it's going to be, that's my big question for James is how are we going to do this breakup and what are we going to do with that? And it was the exact reason why we couldn't do it before, but we're going to have to do it now. So,
and that's not true. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. It could be that maybe, as Mike said, this sort of rivalry week may not be part of the season. This could be like, hey, the season's back. We're going to make an announcement once this madness is over. It's going to come like Mike said, we haven't seen the full schedule. Yeah. So this could be a buffer week. I mean, we don't know, and those are the questions that we're asking right now to try to get some clarification on what's going to happen. But we're hopeful. We are so hopeful right now. All right, so that means if all goes as we hope, next week we could be making predictions. So everyone needs to be paying attention to what's going on. Picks. But more important, I know, picks. Back to picks. Maybe I'll get some of these guys to write some articles again. It's nuts. But the special announcement for those of you who have stayed with us, if you are a Patreon supporter, then I sent out a little poll at the beginning with some mixed results, but enough to make us want to go forward with this. Tomorrow we're going to be having a special Zoom room for our Patreon supporters. It's going to be a watch party. Mike, Blaine, and I are all going to be there unless other life things take us away at some point, but we are going to be there. We're going to have a watch party for the final game of the MLS is Back tournament. You can expect an email about that and with information to let you know, and it should be a lot of fun. So if you don't want to come, that's fine. We're still doing the podcast, so I hope you are enjoying those. But we're going to have a watch party for those of you who want to join, so it should be a lot of fun. We'll just watch the game together, hang out. Maybe we'll make it, to borrow a phrase from ETR, a brown liquor special. Though we will not be prejudiced if you want to bring clear liquor or amber liquor or blue or green or whatever kind of liquor you want to bring. I don't know. We could see whatever sort of potent or non-potent potable that you care to enjoy, and during a soccer game, you're welcome to have that. So fun news. We've been wanting to do something like that for a little while. Blaine and Mike were talking about it last week off air, so we're going to make it happen. It should be fun. Any final comments from you guys before we close out?
Just ready to start making awful picks again.
And blaming it on your son. That's what's going to happen. And Blaine blames it on Lily. That's what's going to happen.
No, I mean my son made better picks than I.
That's true. That's true. Your son was good. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening to us. Fingers crossed that we get back to the regular game next week, but we will keep you up to date on anything new that happens with that. And if we get some from MLS, we will have them here to tell you about it. So thank you very much for listening tonight, and good luck.